Today's story is called The Glory Garden. It is a story about obedience from the book of Genesis. It is written and illustrated by T.F. Marsh. Ah, yes. Peace to you, my friend. I am Coils, the garden's snake. As your tale-teller this day, let me tell you about a wonderful garden and a terrible trick. Now wait, you're thinking, aha, I've heard this before. It's about Adam, Eve, a fruit, and that evil, crafty, sinful snake. No, 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 it wasn't me, but he, the serpent. Please, let me explain. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. Then he created us living creatures. From the mighty blue splashers of the sea to the tiny buzz gliders of the air. And everything God made was good. Soon, a few of us were gathered to the Garden of Eden. We called it the Glory Garden because God's glory shone everywhere. Suddenly, we felt a strange breeze. It spun around and around over the ground, then disappeared. But it had left something behind. God had made a dust creature with very strange features. We crept closer to look at it. "What is it?" I asked. "Is it safe to look at? It's different from all of us, you know." A big brown shaggy huffed. "This dust creature is different from us, but that doesn't bother me. You just relax, little one." I was about to settle my coils when, suddenly, God breathed into the dust creature's snout, and it moved. What would it do next? As fast as I could, I slithered away until I bumped into a land mover. It hadn't heard what had happened, so I told it all about that strange dust creature. Just then, the dust creature came out of the bushes. My coils knocked together as it came closer. It looked down at me and gave me a name. Coils. Coils the garden snake. Say, this dust creature was okay. He was named Adam, a man. His task was to care for and rule over the garden, and us too. He named all the creatures. Why, he even presented me with a mate, Tawny, another garden snake. Everything was simply perfect, but there was still one thing missing. There was no mate for Adam. He was lonely, and God saw this wasn't good. So God caused Adam to fall asleep. Then that strange breeze returned, spun around and around on the ground, then disappeared just like before. Only this time there were two dust creatures. From Adam's rib, God had created another of Adam's kind. When Adam opened his eyes, we presented him with his beautiful bride. We waited for his response. Ah, yes, it was love at first sight. She was simply perfect. Adam named her Eve. Then he took Eve's hand and began to show her through the glory garden. "Say," whispered Tawny, "let's follow those two." Sounded good to me. We soon caught up with them in God's majestic meadow. Wildflowers covered the ground. Rows of trees shook their golden leaves. Crickets chirped and bullfrogs croaked. Ah, yes. All around us, God's glory shone. Next, Adam led Eve to God's wondrous waterfall. Walking behind that roaring wall of water, We watched fish tail swinging and salamanders belly flopping. We were even joined by two lovebirds singing love songs. Ah, yes, within the water's mist, God's glory shone. For our last stop of the day, Adam led Eve down to God's awesome ocean. There we were greeted by a friendly fellow, Wide Eyes the whale.
"Evening, folks," blubbered Wide Eyes. "Welcome to our swimming hole."
We all swam until the sun set, and that perfect day came to a close. Ah, yes, surrounded by ocean waves, God's glory shone. Now, you might ask, was there anything that Adam and Eve weren't allowed to enjoy? Well, God did give them one rule. They could eat from any tree except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If they ate from that tree, they would die. But enough of that for now. Bright stars brought in a new day, the seventh day. God was finished with his creation, and it was very good. So he rested, and so did we. The next day, Tawny and I awoke to ocean waves and seagull squawks. But Adam and Eve were gone. "I'll bet if we follow their footprints we'll find them," Tawny said. So we slithered as fast as two snakes can slither through the sand. We soon spotted them near the center of the garden. But something else was there too. A huge hissing creature with very strange features. It was resting under the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. My coils began to curl. "What is it?" I asked. "Is it safe to look at? It's different from all of us." Tawny huffed. "This hissing creature is different from us, but we don't know anything about it yet. Just relax, Coils." I was about to settle my coils when suddenly Eve approached the creature. The hissing creature turned his great head and stared down at Eve. And then he spoke. We slithered closer to listen.
"Why, Eve," he proudly hissed, "I have a question. Has God said you shall not eat from any tree in the garden?"
Eve explained that God had said that they could eat from any tree except one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If they touched or ate from that tree, they would die. Now, I must stop to say something important. The word serpent means to make a hissing sound. In the future days, this hissing creature or serpent will be known as the dragon and the serpent of old. But please, please, please remember, it wasn't just any snake that deceived Adam and Eve. It was the evil hissing creature, that serpent. Now I can continue with the story.
"Ha!"
gasped the serpent.
"You won't die. God knows that when you eat from the tree, you'll be just like him, knowing good from evil. You'll be wise. Why, you will be just like God."
I turned to Tawny. That crafty serpent wants Eve to do the very thing God said not to do. As we watched, Eve made her decision. She picked a fruit and took a bite. Ah, what has she done? Then she turned to Adam. He could join her with one simple bite. She gave the fruit to him, and then he took a bite. After a few moments, Tawny sighed in relief. Why, nothing terrible has happened to them. They don't look different, she said. But something terrible had happened inside of them. They had disobeyed God. They had chosen evil, and they were ashamed. They're filled with sin sickness now, Tawny said. The serpent laughed. Adam and Eve dropped the fruit and ran away. They covered themselves with fig leaves and hid from God. Tawny frowned. They can't hide from God. Tawny was right. In the evening, God called out for Adam. Had Adam eaten from the forbidden tree? A simple yes would do. Instead, Adam blamed Eve. She had given him the fruit. Eve blamed the serpent. He had tricked her. Well, God had to deal with this sinful deed. First, he changed the serpent into a belly-sliding dust eater. But then he gave Adam and Eve a special promise. From Eve's descendants would come one who would destroy that crafty serpent and his work forever. Eve would now have pain in childbirth. Also, Adam would rule over her. Finally, Adam would have to work very hard to grow their food. When his life was over, he would die and return to the dust of the ground. And yet, after all of this, God still loved those two. He covered their nakedness with a creature's skin. Then, for their own good, he sent Adam and Eve out of the glory garden forever. That sin sickness began covering all of us creatures, so we had to leave the glory garden too. And because Adam and Eve had been tricked by a belly slider, some people started blaming a certain snake. But please remember, it wasn't me, but he, the serpent. But wait, put away your tissues. We would soon see happier days. Adam and Eve, too. Ah, the tales to be told. But that's for another tale-teller day. Well, now that we've imagined how it might be if animals could tell us their tales, go ahead and read God's account of this story in your Bible. You'll find it in Genesis chapter 1, reading from verse 1 all the way through chapter 3, verse 24. And by the way, Genesis is the very first book of the Bible. Now, if you don't have a copy of your own, then you can go to that wonderful thing called the internet, and you can look up BibleGateway.com and just type in Genesis 1, and I'll put a link to it down below.